Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Tyrone back with Tech Life. And once again, I pulled up the JD Power report that released earlier this morning. And we got to point it out again. Like I said, I usually wait for all the reports to drop. Then we look at all the reports and then we form an opinion. And one thing I can say, looking at OpenSignal, looking at the JD Power, and then when we, backtracking to the first half of 2024 on RootMetrics, and now that we're getting ready to, we're very close to receiving the second half 2024 reports, T-Mobile is improving, and they're improving vastly. And we can see that even in this report. So I'm going to pull this up again. And yes, the lowest number is the better score. So Verizon still wins 4 out of the 6 regions. Pointed that out in the Verizon video. And you can make the argument that from 9 to 11, that's a decent percentage of a jump, that Verizon is still ahead. But T-Mobile is closing that gap. And if you look at, T-Mobile comparing them to AT&T, right? Just a few years ago, we couldn't have been sitting here and say that T-Mobile is now comparable to AT&T. That just was never the case. But now with T-Mobile improving, we're seeing that on the reports. They still have some margins to make up against Verizon, and I think T-Mobile understands that, and the team is hungry, and they're looking at Verizon from a network perspective as the benchmark competitor. Internally, T-Mobile views themselves as being ahead of AT&T on network, and they're now trying to close the gap once and for all to Verizon. So if you look at this testing, T-Mobile is right there. They're not that far off. It's not like a 50 or 60 or 70% gap that it once was. They are mostly tied with AT&T, and if they're not tied, they're ahead of AT&T. So that's a pretty big accomplishment. Now that we're almost on the 5-year anniversary of the merger closing. People thought, and some still think, that with the current CapEx and what T-Mobile has been investing, that they couldn't pull this off. I've said it before, I'll say it again in this video in case you're new to this video. T-Mobile spent 11 in the first year, like 12 billion in the second year, almost 14 billion of annual CapEx in the third year, to really integrate and develop and build out this network. So now they're comfortable at the 9 to 10 billion. I've done the math. I've talked about it previously. T-Mobile could easily reduce 5 billion off of the total amount that they're giving back to investors, and they could invest that back into the network. They could do 12, 13, 14 billion annually if they wanted it to. But everything is pointing to the 9 to 10 billion being enough. They can get to substantially closing the gap to the competition. Will it ever be toe to toe? I mean, that remains to be seen, right? We have to take into consideration the Starlink situation once that goes commercially live at scale. If it's good enough, it's good enough. And that technology can get better, to close some of the other gaps that are still out there. But T-Mobile is building that rural network each and every year. More and more sites are going up, and that rural footprint is expanding. So it's interesting to see this, right? It's not something that we're pulling out of a hat anymore. It's in the reporting. And once RootMetrics reports, T-Mobile will have likely improved again. And again, I'll point out, it's not the best. They're not the best, but they are improving, and they're steadily improving each and every report. They just get better, and eventually they're going to be right there. They're not going to be far off. I fully anticipate, right, the way that it's going, the next 12 to 18 months, once JD Powers releases their next reportings, I fully anticipate T-Mobile to be closer to Verizon and pull ahead of AT&T. That's the path that they're on currently, and that's how quickly they're improving. So I just wanted to talk about that in this video. T-Mobile is vastly improving. We see it on the Open Signal reports. We're now seeing it on JD Power, Root Metrics. We saw it in the first half. They won like almost 50 metros. They've never done that. Never, ever, ever, ever has T-Mobile won that many metros. As a standalone LTE build, they've never been able to accomplish that. But now, as the combined company with the assets of the Sprint merger that they gained, all that spectrum, they're putting it to use. And soon they're going to get the spectrum asset of US Cellular, right? The cell sites are leased, so they're not buying them. And even if US Cellular goes out of business, they're probably going to sell those off to a third party, and American Tower, Crown Castle, Tillman will probably operate. T-Mobile doesn't own and operate cell sites, so that's not gonna be a thing that they're gonna start all of a sudden. So just wanted to point that out. T-Mobile improving. Stay tuned for more. Like, share, subscribe. See y'all in the next one. Peace.